All right, we got an official game week line for Georgia and Clemson. Georgia favored by 13 and a half, which is slightly higher than it was earlier this year when it was about 12 and a half or something. This thing's going to tinker around 13 and a half all the way to 15. I don't see it going down, but it could. And I think that's the curious part to a lot of y'all who are out here betting is, once it gets to 14, you start looking at two scores. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. And we saw, earlier today, I'm recording this on Saturday of the Georgia Tech Florida State game. Well, we told you that one was coming. With this one, we got the line at 13 and a half as of today. The over-under is relatively low for the rest of the country. This is one of the lowest ones in Power 4 football. It's 49 and a half. The money line, Georgia, you got to have to bet $610 to win 100. You place a bet on Clemson with 100, you get $440. Kirby Smart is 62-3 straight up as a 13.5 point favorite or more in his career. Do you know which losses those were? Can you think of them off the top of your head? I can tell you who they are. They were South Carolina 2019 at home, Vanderbilt 2016 at home, and then Texas was a 13.5 point dog to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. So those are the three games that they lost. The 62 other games, I don't think we have time for. This is there's a couple more curious statistics for you that I'm going to get to in a little bit. I think that, first of all, are you on our newsletter? If you're not, make sure you're clicking the link down below and joining the newsletter. We got a lot of people on there, tens of thousands of people. Make sure you're on our newsletter. It's free. You get this sort of stuff emailed to you straight to your inbox. You don't have to go to the sewage on social media if you don't want to. You don't even have to go to the website. You can just click right straight there. So make sure you're signing up for that below. But I think this is slightly low. I don't know that I don't think it's going to change a lot. I think there's some things that we don't know and we probably won't until sort of smart bettors the wise guys get a hold of things. Is Travis Etienne certainly playing in this game? I'm not reporting this. I anticipate that he will. I don't know why Smile Munden would miss this game. And then, are there going to be any bizarre injuries that pop up between now and Saturday? That should not happen. But we'll see. In terms of, this over-under, look, it's a low number, okay? It's a low number. But consider that, last time Georgia played in this game, they played Oregon, which Clemson was about in the same universe in terms of ranking. That Oregon team is better than this Clemson team, probably. That's very speculative to say, but 49.5 would have barely covered that game, and Georgia killed Oregon. So just keep that in mind when you look at that 49.5. Like right now, Vegas has got this game as something like 34-17. It's something like that. Let me make sure that my math is correct on that. Maybe 34-16, I think it is. Something like that. So a competitive enough game. If you remember Georgia Tech in 2007, something like that, competitive enough. Like not anything unbelievable, where you're sweating in the fourth quarter. I don't know. I mean, look, Georgia's a better team. Now, I thought Florida State was better than Georgia Tech, but and even though I warned all of y'all about that game, I still thought Florida State would win the game. I took them with the points. Georgia, there's a lot going on here that is not like a lot of other games. First of all, Georgia's playing this game. It's a regular season game. Unlike the Tech game, unlike Florida State Tech, Georgia's got the full attention. Clemson's got Georgia's full attention. Like, this is not going to be a surprise. This is a big game. No one's sleepwalking on Clemson. These two programs and Alabama have combined to win 6 of the last 8, I think national championships in the world, in college football. If Georgia were playing Alabama this week, everybody would be going nuts, right? Of course, this is not Alabama. We know this is not Alabama. We've seen Clemson. They are not Alabama, and they've not been Alabama for some time. And I think that's the narrative that Clemson's beating their head against the wall against, as they probably celebrated DJ Uiagalelei losing today. It doesn't change their problem. They do not have explosive playmakers on the outside the way they once did. They certainly do not have a playmaking quarterback. He makes plays, but sometimes he makes the wrong play. And that's my biggest concern watching Clemson is, the quarterback has got to play a steady game. He's got to be good. The last time they played, Kentucky sacked them 8 times. Like, some of that was the quarterback. Some of that was just like the line getting whipped. And I think Clemson's got a capable offense. They just don't have an explosive offense like they did. I saw them plenty, in 18 and 19. I even saw them in 20 live. And like they could zoom up and down the field when they had Trevor and Etienne and those guys on the outside, Mike Williams with Deshaun. Those guys aren't there now. Like, the Etienne plays for Georgia, right? So that's the challenge. Now, I'll be talking about this on my insider report on Sunday, but the key matchup here is the offensive line of Georgia against Clemson's defensive line. This is like the one scenario that Clemson just cannot lose that part of the game. And Kirby was all over the offensive line over the weekend. So during practices. So, practice, I should say, not plural. But if Georgia wins that, then this game's not going to be a competitive game. Like, it will be 14 points or 17 points or 10 or something like that. Is a 10-point win something to celebrate? I would think any win Georgia gets, any win Clemson gets, those are celebratory wins. You'd rather do that than be Florida State right now. I mean, that's gotten bad. So let me get back to a few more of these things. The over-under is at 49.5. Of the games that Kirby's been the coach at Georgia, 49.5 or fewer points has been there a fair amount. And it is exactly 50-50 on which games hit the over and which games hit the under. Okay? So watch yourself on that deal. Okay? Watch yourself on that over-under. I mean, let's say you take the under and Georgia explodes on Clemson. Clemson's going to score some. I mean, I have pretty good intelligence in the Clemson world. People that I trust, they don't think they're going to score 20 points or more. So, if you're going with the under there and you're saying, well, this is going to be, Georgia wins 20-30, that's over. So I just watch it. The other problem is, what if Clemson just doesn't score? Like, the last time they played, they scored 3 points. That was it. So, I don't like that over-under at all. Like, I would stay far away from it if I were y'all, but that's me. Georgia is 2-2 against the line. The last 4 season openers, they did not cover against Arkansas. They covered against Clemson and Oregon, the big games start the season. Arkansas, and then last year they did not cover, narrowly in both cases, but they did not cover against Clemson and Oregon. Georgia upset Clemson somehow. That was an upset. That was literally an upset, which is almost laughable looking back at it. So they covered that line by almost 10 points. And obviously with Oregon, they covered that line. Clemson is 1-3 against the line the last 4 season openers. So, they did not play well against Georgia Tech. I think it was in 22, but they covered the line. So last year, obviously, they lost as a double-digit favorite to Duke. The season before that was the Tech game I'm talking about. They did not cover against Wake Forest. I believe it was in 2020. They didn't look great in that game either. But and against Georgia, they lost the game as a favorite. So, and then this was a kind of a curious thing to me, that this line is 13.5. I was listening to Kirk Herbstreit and everybody earlier this morning, and he was saying, the direct quote from Kirk was, making fun of Dabo is exactly what he wants. And I think, don't construe this as making fun of Dabo Swinney. There's plenty to poke at him about. There's plenty to poke at a lot of these coaches about. And if they can't take it, then they can go retire. But this is going to be and Dabo's going to love this until they actually got to play the game. Clemson's a 13.5 point dog in this game. That is the second biggest underdog for Clemson in Dabo's time at Clemson. Okay. So as much as Clemson is poor little Clemson, I can't remember what it is. Poor little Clemson. He did. I'm sorry for the Southern accent. I shouldn't have done that. I will hear about that one from my wife, but who has a very serious Southern accent, is a very serious Clemson fan. But the curious thing about this one is, as much as Clemson for, I would say, the last 9, well, not all of the last 9 years, but if you talk about the glory years of Clemson, They really started after Georgia whipped their ass in Athens, okay? They put Deshaun in at quarterback. They lost to Florida State. And then, from that point on, they lost to Tech, a good Tech team in 14. But they could tell where they were going. And in 15, they played for the national championship until, today. I will give them these last 3 years. I do not think that these are the glory years. I think these are better years than in the past for Clemson, but they're not the glory years. The glory years were, 15 to 20. So that 6-year season where they played for it, I think, 4 times and won it twice. In all of that time, we've heard a lot about poor little Clemson, or whatever Dabo's phrase is. I like to say poor little Clemson because, you'd think that, the way they are poor mouthing themselves coming in this game, you'd think they have absolutely no shot. Most people are not that stupid to think that they've got no shot to win this game, but they are certainly the underdog. But for all of that talk in Clemson world, Clemson, with Dabo Swinney as their head coach, has been an underdog 23 times. And like most actual underdogs, they have lost more than they've won and then some. They are 7-16 straight up with Dabo Swinney as their coach as underdogs. So if they go into a game as an underdog, they are likely to lose it. One of the games they won as an underdog, very slight underdog, was against Georgia in 13. I would say they probably should not have won that game, but that's okay. They deserved to win it. And, Todd Gurley missing 20 minutes of that game was not ideal for Georgia, considering how important he was to them. But it happened. They deserved to win. There was a lot that went on in that game. That's a lot that goes on in all these games. But you don't want to be the underdog. You certainly don't want to be a double-digit underdog, because wins like Texas over Georgia, Vanderbilt over Georgia, South Carolina over Georgia. The Texas win, I'm not going to say is what is the next category. Those are once-in-a-decade wins. Like, those just don't come around very often. And as here we are in 2024, I think that's the only time Carolina's beaten Georgia in 10 years, if my math is right. So 15 on, and they beat them in 14. So I don't know which one. I don't know where we're at in the season, but they're either 9-1 or 8-2. Vanderbilt hasn't beaten Georgia since 13, so that is 10 years. So these are sort of once in a decade phenomenons, apparently. Now they're not for those schools. They're not once in a decade phenomenons for Kirby. They're once in a every now and then kind of thing. Of course, 2 of those losses happened within a 6-game period, maybe a 7-game period. So there was some, and the 2016 season, much like the beginning of Dabo's time at Clemson, that was a wild year for Georgia. That was a wild year for Georgia. The getting blown out by Ole Miss. I bet Georgia's not ever been blown out by Ole Miss. Probably been beaten pretty good, but not like that. The miracle by by Tennessee. 1-point win by Tech. 1-point win by Vanderbilt. Just kind of got routine by Florida. The Florida game was probably the most normal game of the 16 season that Georgia lost. All the other ones were sort of weird in one way or the other. I mean, even if Georgia had beaten Tennessee that year, that'd have been a strange win. I mean, that'd have been a miracle win for Georgia, with Jacob Eason's pass to Javon Wims. I'm not sure who that was to, but whoever it was, that should have never happened either. So, but reality or unless there's some massive, just massive outlier here, Georgia should win this game. The metrics are that Georgia's got about an 84% chance to win this game. That's for college football. For Georgia, it's a little higher than that. It's just looking at the math at Georgia, it's closer to like 92%. But I digress. I mean, I think when you are a 13-point dog, you're 13.5, whatever, that's a lot. And, that this is the same line that TCU was, a dog to Georgia. This is less. These are fewer points than Tech was to Georgia last year. So there's a lot to be made of this. I do think that just looking at it, I do not like that over under. I don't get a feel for it in any way. But I do think Georgia should win this game. If Georgia doesn't win this game, you're going to kind of be like Florida State, like, what just happened there? but there's a huge difference here. Georgia's quarterback is not DJ Uiagalelei. He's not new to this system. He's not been his program. Georgia's not been complaining about leaving a league. They've not been whining about not getting in the college football playoff. They're not coming off the 60-point loss, the worst bowl loss ever. They're not having, all this exodus of NFL players and all this stuff. They're not starting with a brand new team from scratch. It felt like that a little bit with Florida State. It did not at all feel like that with the Jackets. So I think that's part of what happened there. and even more than that, Tech just was more interested in being physical. And I mean, it was that simple. And I will say this. I think Georgia fans do not properly realize right now where Tech is at versus what the reputation for Tech is at, okay? Those are not the same thing. You should not overreact to where Tech is at with that win. It was a great win. And they should have won that game, by the way. They were clearly the better team. But this is also the same program that a year ago lost to Bowling Green by double digits. So it's both of the things at the same time. I mean, King has become a very good quarterback for them. And I think on Saturday, if you see the quarterbacks, if Clemson does not turn it over, they got a shot. But they're going to need to make some plays. They just don't have the playmakers that they used to, and I think that's going to be problematic. The line's at 13.5. You tell me down below who you got and why. Thanks.